Good evening, one of many political commentators I'm sure you guys are going to be seeing tonight. I'm sure you guys are going to be tuning into Louder with Crowder. I'm sure you'll be checking out Timcast IRL. If you guys have spare time in your evening agenda for watching what's going on with the elections, you should check out Lauren Chen and Lauren Southern. They'll be over on Odysee. I'm going to grab the link for you and put it in the description below when I'm done here because I didn't have a chance to do that before I started. So we're going to look at a couple things that I found super interesting, and I might keep today relatively short because I am going to be over there with the Laurens in about 2 hours after the polls officially close on the East Coast. And we will talk about whether we are going to have, first of all, we're going to figure out why the GOP wasn't involved in these elections beforehand, and we're going to look at whether Politico now thinks that elections actually can be hacked now that it might be in their best interest to say that they are. So let's see what they have to say about that. Okay, so I am going to launch right into this. I'm going to refer you guys to a tweet thread from Harmeet Dillon, whom you guys are already all probably familiar with. This is really interesting, so I'm going to go through this with you one at a time. This election cycle at GOP has recruited and trained over 80,000 poll workers. Poll watchers, poll workers. We've engaged over 1 million volunteers, conducted 5,200 leadership trainings to prepare for election day operations, filed nearly 80 lawsuits, retained dozens of litigators, trained hundreds more. This effort started last year. Okay, this is a really interesting tweet that I need your guys' help with because I'd never heard about anything like this before. This effort started last year once a long-running consent decree dating back to the early 80s, barring the GOP from engaging in election day efforts, expired. The judge literally expired. The next judge refused Dem efforts to extend it. My firm alone is active in multi-states. Others are too. What? Did you guys know that you could not be involved in the election stuff, election day efforts if you're part of the GOP? How on earth does this happen? This seems crazy to me. So if you guys can help me figure out what on earth she's talking about, I think she follows me. If she does, I might just ask her. I'm sure she's super busy. No, she doesn't follow me. Son of a gun. Well, I'll see if I can get a hold of her and see what she's talking about. Or see maybe if somebody like Will Chamberlain knows, because I had never heard of this. This is actually something that Scott Adams brought to my attention this evening because he's like, this is wild. This is twisting my brain. And I was like, that's twisting my brain too. Holy cow, what on earth is happening here? Well, we can finish this here though. Now we can sit around crying or get out and vote and bring neighbors to polls, get involved, run for office, participate, and be the change you want. Sitting on Twitter and complaining does nothing. People are making huge sacrifices to run for office. Let's win, get our country back. People are asking me how to find out more, get involved, and help in 2023-24. Follow protectthevote.com and help turn this place around. I'm proud to serve in the RNC GOP, and I go to sleep at night knowing I did my best to give back to my country. The rest is in God's hands. Good for her. I think this is a right mindset. I think as we're going into this potential huge red tsunami, hopefully it's not a red ripple after all, I think as we're going into this, it is in our best interest to remember that whatever happens, at the end of the day, we are still going to have our lives, we're still going to have our neighbors and our families that we care about, we're still going to have the country that we care about to some degree or another. I think that looking at the federal level is often hugely overwhelming to people, and I have to say I don't think it's the right approach. I think it's what's causing a lot of this chaos and difficulty with all of our a lot of our stress regarding politics. I think that we need to consider that we need to start from the bottom and go to the top, and that means going out and operating on a very low level that's not glamorous at all. So I think I've mentioned this in the past. My mom helped run the precinct where we lived, and she helped to do some of those caucuses. And she was a big fan of Doug Lamborn, who stayed in office with the Republicans in Colorado for a really long time. They had the Taxpayer Bill of Rights Act that they really enjoyed. That was really useful in Colorado that I unfortunately don't know enough about, but my mom was very involved with the grassroots level GOP stuff in our state. That was something that was very meaningful for her, and at the time I thought it was kind of boring, but now I see the true impact of what she was doing. There's really significant work to be done there. I think that looking too big, like at too big a scale, is going to be overwhelming and intimidating to people, and I think that people often get stressed out about this. So I heard that this last election in 2020 was the most secure we'd ever had. There was absolutely no fraud. There's no chance of anything bad happening at all. So let's look over at what Politico is saying about this. We'll get into some of those details. 6 election security threats to watch for on election day. Well, that's crazy. I didn't think there were any threats. But let's continue. Hacking threats and disinformation fears loom large as voters head to the polls. I don't know about you, but the word disinformation now just bounces off my back. Like, I don't care at all about the people who use it. It means that they have nothing else to go off of. It just means they came up against an argument they couldn't refute. I think that's the best analysis of disinformation we have so far. And even some of the misinformation stuff too. It's just something that they can't refute. If they could, they wouldn't be calling it names. But I digress. Let's see what they have to say. Let's see what these 6 issues are. The midterms face a bevy of digital threats, from stolen Twitter accounts to hacked election websites that could spark chaos, confusion, and unrest that last long after the polls close. The 2020 presidential election was rife with allegations of voting machine hacks that were later debunked. Okay, so it was rife with allegations that were debunked. So there was no voter machine hacking that was going on in the 2020 election. Okay, got that clear? Let's continue. Yet there are real risks that hackers could tunnel into voting equipment and other election infrastructure to try to undermine Tuesday's vote. Now, do they mean really tunnel into these, or are they being hyperbolic, or is it like a turn of phrase? Well, let's see what they have to say, because they also use the word undermine, which to me just sounds like they're talking about actual tunnels. The US has many safeguards protecting voting equipment, so any actual hack would probably be localized, quickly detected, and unlikely to affect final results. But as 2020 showed, even an attempt to change votes or the mere allegation of tampering could undermine faith in the outcome. Yeah, why are we changing votes, Politico? Let's talk about that. The U.S. officials charged with protecting election security say they're watching for threats from multiple groups and countries. In recent months, social media companies and cybersecurity researchers have identified Chinese influence operations aimed at the elections. Okay, that doesn't surprise me at all. China has a vested interest in who's in power. They probably want somebody like Joe Biden who's asleep at the wheel or friendly to them in power. More attendance to securing voting systems hasn't eliminated critical technical and human threats to our elections, said Matthew Weil, executive director of the Bipartisan Policy Center's Democracy Program. And this cycle is practice for 2024. The federal government has worked since 2016 to improve coordination with state and local officials on everything from fixing digital vulnerabilities to promoting trusted sources of information. Biden administration officials say that's one reason that they've seen less foreign interference than in 2016. Okay, so this is something they've been working on. Fascinating. Okay, so that's how they can say that it was rigged in 2016, but it wasn't rigged in 2020. I'm curious how they spin it for tomorrow when they say undoubtedly that it was definitely rigged in some way by probably some more foreign malign influence in favor of the Republicans. But as CISA Director Jen Easterly, whose agency leads federal election security efforts, told reporters recently, the current election threat environment is more complex than it has ever been. She cited the ways that multiple different threats, from cyber attacks to disinformation to the harassment of election officials, are overlapping. Fascinating. Let's go on. Here are the threats to watch for and the final votes as the final votes for the midterms are cast. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about with the mis and disinformation. So let's see what they have to say, because I will tell you right now, my view of misinformation and disinformation is just an argument that leftists cannot take apart. It's something that they can't tackle. Lies and conspiracy theories about the security of election systems are what most worry election supervisors and federal cybersecurity and intelligence officials, because those falsehoods can inflame mistrust, that it discourages people from voting, and provoke anger that spurs people to threaten violence against election administrators. This is what most worries them. That's very interesting to me. You would think that a federal cybersecurity official would be more concerned with cybersecurity than with misinformation. Russia stoked divisions during the 2016 campaign, and federal agencies recently warned that foreign actors may once again spread falsehoods about supposed hacks of election systems. But in recent years, domestic sources of mis and disinformation have become the more widespread and potent threat. Election-related falsehoods are ubiquitous in right-wing circles, and foreign adversaries eagerly exploit these lies whenever possible. I don't believe Politico. I don't think that they're telling us this in good faith. If there is misinformation in the right-wing circles, it is because people recognize that they cannot trust the media. And when it comes down to it, and when you can't trust somebody like the media, you're going to have to come up with your own solutions. And who can blame them, honestly? I have absolutely no issue with somebody who sits down, looks at the way things are, and says, what is going on with this? They try to piece it together based on what they can figure out on their own. Oy. U.S. officials remain on alert for false announcements of a rescheduled election or corrupted ballots from spoofed email addresses and websites purporting to represent election officials, false claims of hacked voter data, or last-minute thefts and leaks of campaign communications. I will say there is a little element in this that is probably factual. This is called phishing, where they send you an email from a fake email address. This is something that my husband talks about all the time. This is something that he works with. His company is trying to make sure that nobody falls for these kinds of scams. This is how they use this is what they use to get a hold of private information and stuff like this, at least in the private sector. As far as the election goes, who knows? Maybe they're doing something similar. I don't blame them for just trying to cause trouble and sow mayhem and chaos. While disinformation gets a lot of attention because it is spread deliberately, honest poll worker mistakes at precincts and glitches such as brief voting machine outages can lead to innocent misunderstandings that generate misinformation. Okay, so it's interesting that they put this out before what happened in Arizona, because I don't know if you guys were watching what happened in Arizona, but it was actually a big mess. In fact, I'm going to go look up what I tweeted about this because it was fascinating. So this is about Maricopa County, Arizona, and Harmeet Dillon's talking about if you've not checked in, polling place you're at here in Maricopa County is not working, find another place with a shorter line here. She gives a link to get to it. Oh my gosh, I made up a whole thread about this. It's kind of disturbing because what's happening in Maricopa County is genuinely disturbing. There's a judge who blocked an Arizona county from hand counting ballots, which is very interesting. I don't think we're going to have time to get into that, but I will just touch on this one in New Jersey. Voting machines are down in Mercer County, New Jersey. That's from a few hours ago. Okay, so this is really interesting. I think this is a bit of the twist of the Matrix. Chairman at Maricopa County Board of Supervisors Bill Gates, AZ, says 20% of voting centers are having issues with tabulators. He says the ballot can still be dropped in the box. It will just get centrally tabulated tonight. He says they're working to fix the issue. I don't believe them. I don't believe them. And not just because his name is Bill Gates, although that is really freaking weird. Arizona, there are 223 voting centers across Maricopa County. That means at least 44 of their polling locations are experiencing issues with tabulators. Election officials say techs are working on the problem, but there is no estimate on when the issues will be resolved. This was only 5 hours ago. Okay, so this is 1 p.m. Eastern time. Arizona, technical staff are working to resolve an issue with tabulators and investigating the cause. The statement from Maricopa County elections on 20% of voting centers having issues with tabulators. Thank you for asking for comment on the tabulators. I can offer the following statement to you on behalf of Maricopa County elections. Technical staff, blah, blah, blah. Voters have a number of options, blah, blah, blah. People can still check in and then vote their ballot at the voting booth. Once complete, they can insert their ballot in the secure slot on the ballot box where it will be counted at the tabulation and election center. I don't like the idea of sending all the ballots to be counted in one place. I don't like that at all. That just seems to me like another possible point of failure. I would have zero trust in this system. Arizona, election officials, oh my gosh, go back. Lost my place. Election officials in Maricopa County say voters who already checked in but want to cast a ballot at another site have to check out with a poll worker to return the issued ballot. This sounds like a nightmare. This sounds like a cluster. This is a serious issue. I'm going to raise heck about this because this is crazy. I'm so upset about this. We've had 2 years to prepare for this, and this is how it's turning out in Arizona, and I'm just so annoyed by this. Anyway, I digress. Maricopa County election officials say technicians have changed printer settings, which seems to have resolved the issue. The printer settings? That was really it? What kind of untech savvy people are running this? 60 vote centers out of 233 were impacted. Arizona, every legal vote will be tabulated, I promise. Sure. Recorder following tabulator issues at 60 vote centers. Okay, so they're going to use this to delay the count in Arizona, and they're going to say it's all fair and it was just a printer issue. It's not an issue with okay, so it is a printer issue. It's not an issue with the tabulator. So they spent all day telling us it was an issue with the tabulator, and now it just turns out it was a printer issue. Oh my gosh, this is absolutely nonsense. They're now operational. Okay, so right before polls are about to close at about, so Arizona doesn't have daylight saving time, so I think we're on the same time they are. It's a little after 6 p.m. here, and they're just now figuring this out. Pima County reported minor tech issues this morning with printers being down. They're now operational. I have lost a lot. Yeah, printer settings, you gotta be kidding me, Maricopa County. Seriously, I have such an issue with this. I don't really blame people who have no confidence in the system after this. This is absolutely nonsense. I'm really glad that Harmeet went through and made sure that people were trained to tackle this, because this is exactly the kind of thing that I think we're going to be seeing all over the place all day long today and probably for the next week. I was hearing something about how they're going to be counting ballots as far out as November 14th. I don't remember what state that was. I think that might have been Pennsylvania. I think Annie was telling me something about that. But anyway, let's read a little bit more of this Politico article because we only got through the first one. Crashing election office and campaign websites. Hackers have one relatively low-tech tool for knocking campaigns off balance and disrupting voters' access to reliable election information, forcing websites to crash using automated tools that simulate massive floods of people visiting the sites. Few major tech companies like Cloudflare and Google offer free protection against these distributed denial of service attacks to election offices and political campaigns, but many websites remain unprotected. Oh, here we go. A Russian DDoS campaign recently knocked several state government websites offline, although those attacks did not specifically target election sites. So it's interesting that that's something they were practicing doing. Fortunately, DDoS attacks only temporarily disrupt sites, and they do not mean there are vulnerabilities in computer networks that would expose servers to more serious types of attacks like data theft or corruption. Okay, that's good. Federal government has urged the public not to overreact to DDoS attacks, noting that election websites run separately from the database that store vote tallies and registration data. Sure. Even so, 11th hour websites outages could pose problems for political campaigns or election officials hoping to promote critical messages such as campaign talking points, polling plan, place updates, or encouragements to stay in line at the last minute. Okay, campaign social media account hijacking, cyber attacks on voter registration databases, targeted voter harassment. Interesting. I'm sure they will blame this on the right. Let's see what they have to say. This relatively novel threat represents an evolution in how foreign governments use hacking campaigns to meddle in U.S. elections. After stealing voter records from a state election database in 2020, Iranian operatives threatened those voters with unspecified consequences if they didn't vote to re-elect then-President Donald Trump. I have a very hard time believing this. Why didn't I hear about this, and why was it not a bigger story? Don't recall it at all. The messages, which contained false allegations of vulnerabilities in election technology, were designed to look like they came from Proud Boys, a right-wing extremist group. Okay, I disagree with their characterization of the Proud Boys. The U.S. government quickly linked Tehran to the emails, warned election officials about them, and disclosed the campaign publicly. Federal prosecutors subsequently indicted 2 Iranian men for the operation. Interesting. It's unclear how effective the messages were at convincing victims to vote for Trump, so Tehran and other U.S. adversaries may not try it again. Still, be on the lookout for similarly inflammatory emails. That is very interesting. So they got 2 Iranian men. I wonder how many voters they influenced. I'd be very curious. Wireless modems enabling hack. Here we go. This is something they told us could not happen in 2020. Wireless modems enabling hacks of voting machines or vote tallies. What? That's crazy. At least 7 states and Washington, D.C. use wireless modems to transmit unofficial election night results to their central offices. These modems use telecommunications networks that are vulnerable to hackers, and malicious actors could exploit them to tamper with unofficial vote data, corrupt voting machines, or compromise the computers used to tally official results. We now have to worry about anybody getting access to a communication network that is fundamentally open. Matt Blaze, a Georgetown University computer scientist and law professor who studies voting systems, told Politico last month. Okay, so I have a serious question. We've known about these threats for how long? For at least 2 years, right? And we didn't fix them. Nobody did anything about them. Because my husband works in this field trying to make sure that things are secure and very difficult to hack, whether it's teaching people what to look out for, kind of like Politico is talking about in this article, and whether it's making sure that they're impervious to something like a network getting hacked. There are ways to make this happen. Companies go out of their way all the time to ensure that their own private communications are extremely private. Whether it's like carefully, I'm not sure of all the stuff, but it's like encrypting the network and making sure that no one can hack in by guessing, crazy simple passwords and stuff like that. I think that if a private company can work on this and make it happen, then I feel like these electoral professionals should not be in charge if they're just letting their guard down. But at this point, I don't think it is in good faith. And I am genuinely concerned about the outcome of this election, because I don't think that the Democrats are going to be willing to allow themselves to lose. I think they think there's too much at stake for this. So I wanted to look up France. Voting system in France. I believe France has outlawed voting machines. Let's see what we find out here. Let's look at it together. Yeah, okay, so we've got from April 2024, France's old school voting system. Look at that. Those are people dropping ballots into a box. A man cats his vote in the second round of the French presidential election in Marseille, southern France, on Sunday, April 2024. Far-right candidate, blah, blah, blah. Paper ballots tucked in paper envelopes. No absentee voting and no early voting either. French voters in Sunday's presidential election are using an old school system that has defied calls for more flexibility or modernization. You know who hasn't had serious threats about voter fraud and issues with voting machines? France. And why would they? They're literally just having people put their vote in an envelope and drop it in the glass box, whatever it is. Machine voting has been allowed on experimental basis, but the purchase of new machines has been frozen since 2008 due to security concerns. Only about 60 towns still use them out of 35,000 municipalities in France. Last year, Macron's centrist government, blah, 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 they tried to pass an amendment to allow early voting by machine to encourage electoral participation. Amid COVID, the Senate, led by a conservative majority, rejected the measure, arguing it was announced with too little notice and wasn't solid enough legally. 100% fair. There are other options. Wow. Mail-in voting was banned in 1975 amid fears of potential fraud. People who can't go to the polls for various reasons can authorize someone else to vote for them. Why would you have any other system? If you can't go to the poll yourself, you should be able to say, okay, my granddaughter is going to do it for me. She'll bring my ballot. I will sign it. I will seal it. She can bring it straight to the ballot box for me. She can sign off as a secondary person or however they have it set up. To do so, a voter must fill out a form ahead of time and bring it to the police station. Up to 7% of people voted by proxy in the last presidential election 5 years ago. French people living abroad vote in embassies or consulates. This sounds like the perfect system, okay? This is so simple and so straightforward. I feel like the US is really complicating it. And one of the most irritating things about all of this early and absentee voting is that it results in long election days. We won't know all the midterm results on election night. That's normal. Is it really normal? Because I remember in Colorado in 2018, I remember going to sleep and being kind of frustrated because the election wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. And then in the morning, guess what? We had all the results. So everything had come to fruition. I believe there were a couple races that weren't fully closed. They wrapped up that day. The literal next day after the election. Let's read this though. Let's see what they have to say for themselves. As is typically the case, states with more mail-in ballots may need more time to count them. Sure, fine. While it's felt like we've been eagerly anticipating the outcome of the midterms for weeks, a good thing to keep in mind on election night is that there's a lot that we may not know immediately because of how much time it takes to process ballots. That delay won't be a sign that anything has gone amiss, but the result of needing time to count votes, including mail-in ballots, which often take longer to tally because many states can't start processing them until Election Day. Since each state also establishes its own vote counting policies and has different polling times, some states are also poised to be faster than others when it comes to reporting their returns. Due to all this variability, not to mention a range of different time zones, the results will be staggered and each party's respective leads could shift significantly in the process. Here's a rundown of a few things to expect as we wait for election results on Tuesday evening and later this week. Several states, including key swing states, may not be called on election night. Okay. Pennsylvania. Polls close in Pennsylvania at 8 p.m. Eastern. Results could take longer because the state does not begin counting mail-in ballots until Election Day. In 2020, Pennsylvania's presidential election results were not called until the Saturday after the election, a dynamic that could be the case again for races that are particularly close, as the Senate race is expected to be. In fact, I'm going to look up Pennsylvania. Judge in Pennsylvania. You guys can see how hard it is for me to type like this. It says November 14th. This is the information I have. Let's see what they have to say. A judge did not change Pennsylvania's ballot deadline for the 2022 election. Let's see if that's actually true. This article is blah, blah, blah. A judge in Pennsylvania did not order local officials to count mail ballots received 6 days after Election Day, contrary to viral misinformation on Twitter claiming so. No such order adjusting the ballot deadline from November 8th to November 14th has been issued by a judge in Pennsylvania, nor has such a case been brought. The deadline remains 8 p.m. today for all mail-in and in-person ballots. Okay, I'm happy to hear that. A post making the claim Tuesday came from a user named Kyle Becker, whose profile says he's a journalist who's worked for Fox News, Newsmax, and One America News. I'm very curious where he got this information, because they are discounting this information. Let's see, misinformation. Okay, they're just calling it misinformation. I am going to have to figure out, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, because I am so curious where that came from. That's good to know, at least. But I think that Vox is kind of trying to set the stage. I think one of the main things that everybody was most concerned about when we when we started seeing information about how long it might take for ballots to be counted, was that they were setting the stage for some kind of extreme fraud. And hopefully that's not the case. I'm a little bit concerned that they're just going to keep counting until they get the number that they want. So I guess we'll see what happens. I'm a little bit, disturbed by this, I guess. I haven't been able to vote in our new city, unfortunately, which, again, it's a blue city, so I don't think that it would make a huge difference anyway. So I don't know what's going to happen going forward. I will say to not lose hope. Don't lose hope in the institution. Voting is still a net positive. It is still something that a responsible citizen does. It is a right and a responsibility for people who are well informed. And I know that all of you guys are very well informed and very much care about the future of this country, so I really recommend going out and checking what's going on. Let's read your comments just a little bit. Ben Shapiro addressed Pennsylvania today and did state it would take several days to count due to the vote counting laws, which make it substantially a longer process. Yeah, so I don't know what he was referring to because I was listening to him right before this, and he mentioned that too, but I don't know what law in Pennsylvania he was looking at. I know that some states, part of this is so hard because each state makes its own rules. It's kind of challenging. Long few days because they're going to try and drag this out. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I voted Maricopa without issue. Then again, I'm a registered libertarian. Yeah, so this was apparently in a pretty red part of the county. So we'll see. First election with Liz. Tell me what's going on. Lots of stuff that I don't like very much. It doesn't look very nice. I am just staggered. I like to believe that people tend to be incompetent before they're evil. And this just looks like massive incompetence. Like, this happens every 2 years. We have an election. And every election season, it seems like each time it's getting more and more complex and it's getting harder and harder to keep track of. So it's really frustrating to watch because they knew this was going to happen. They knew about the threats that were pending. Like, my husband is constantly looking at this kind of threats and looking at the kind of different attacks that might come their way. And he is going out of his way to make sure that his company is prepared for all this stuff. It's just frustrating. Anyway, let me read some of your comments. Happy voting day, hoping for a red tsunami. Yep, that's something we do. We don't hope it happens. I saw a tweet today and didn't know if it was legit. Wow. Good way to put it. Blah, blah, blah. I am the underminer. Lids isn't on Timcast anymore because her and her husband Andy moved states. Yep, that's true. Yep, that's true. Very true. It's a good summary of everything we're up to. I know, guys. I love Lids ever since she rocked the Blink 182 shirt. Yorkshire Cat. Heck yes, I knew she was legit. Bring back the Blink shirt, Lids. Yeah, right now I'm too chunky for that shirt, but I will get back to it. Don't worry. I don't get rid of stuff like that. I got that at a concert, so I will bring it back. Don't forget the Red Mirage stuff, which we won't know who won for weeks. That is a very interesting point. There's a lot of talk about a Red Mirage where they can just kind of pretend like there wasn't actually a red tsunami while they continue to scramble and try to pretend they found a bunch of extra votes. But again, I will tell you guys right now that I don't trust the 2,000 Mules narrative, and you guys can yell at me all you want. But I think that because they weren't willing to bring out that information, they were like, well, we have all this information. I'm like, this just sounds like the release the Kraken stuff, and I'm very tired of that. If you have evidence that some wrongdoing was done, I want to see it in full immediately. I want people to get in trouble for it. If I saw something like a box of ballots that had been brought in from somewhere else that I didn't think should be there, I would be on the rooftops. I would be causing all sorts of chaos. I would not shut up until every single news network had me on and listened to me talk about it. And I don't understand where the people are who are going like that, because I'm not even as disagreeable as a lot of people are. I just think that some things are important enough that everyone needs to know about them. And if you're doing something like a 2,000 Mules type documentary, and you have information that could lead to all sorts of people getting in trouble, why would you? I guess I don't understand why you would not share that information as soon as humanly possible. You know, we were told about all sorts of fraudulent actions right after the 2020 election, and no one was able to show me the evidence. And I know that there were weird little quirks. There was plenty. I think the biggest reason, I will tell you guys forthright, that forget 2,000 Mules, I think that the silencing of the Hunter Biden laptop story was what turned this election in the direction that Joe Biden needed it to go. Period. I think that was it. I think that was more significant than any kind of voter ferrying ballots across. You guys know what I mean. Ballot harvesting, that's what it's called. I can't think of words. Too much coffee. I need to calm down. And I don't think that was where the issue was. I think the issue was 100% with big tech, which we know to be oppositional to the values that our country was founded on. And I think that's where the main problem comes from. I think that it's a waste of time and a red herring to talk about stuff like Sidney Powell was talking about, stuff like, what was the name of that other lawyer? That ridiculous lawyer. Oh, why can't I remember his name? He made a little bit of a splash in 2020 talking about how he knew that there had been some kind of election fraud, and then would never talk about it and would not present evidence about it. So you guys can give me a hard time about that if you so choose, but I do know that a significant percentage of voters would not have voted for Joe Biden if they'd known about the Hunter Biden laptop, but we'll see. Let's see here. Is Liz able to get super chats? Not yet. I have to verify my physical address, which is a pin that they mailed me, so I have to wait until it gets here. No worries. It's 4:15 p.m. right now in Arizona. Interesting. Okay, so we are 2 hours apart, I think. It sounds like. Oh, that's right. They're in a totally different time zone, too. It's happening all over the country. Sure, you're going to have to present me evidence of that. You're not on the same time as Arizona if it's 6 p.m. where you are. Yeah, I figured that out. I think that time zones are like my it's my biggest weakness. I can't figure out time zones to save my life, as you guys just saw. I work with slots, different machines, same concept as a printer and a scanner. You don't leave until the thing is printing correctly and scanning correctly. Yeah, of course not. It's said that I have more diligence with a slot machine than these technicians have with voting machines. Dude, I can't. The incompetence is just too much for me. I am very frustrated. And I'm going to go on with Lauren Chen and Lauren Southern and be all frustrated at them and see, hopefully they have something positive to say. Hopefully they'll have numbers to show us and we'll look at who's winning and who's losing. They haven't even started to tally Senate races in all these different states. So we'll get into it for sure. And I hope that hopefully they have something positive too. Let's see. Same here. I don't trust the election if it isn't declared tonight. Yeah, I would really prefer a much smaller window. I think it should be 1 day for voting. The way France does it sounds awesome to me. You guys just learned about that with me. I think they definitely have the right idea. You can't do any absentee voting. If you want to have someone else vote for you, you need to go figure it out with the police department ahead of time. I think that's great. Very cool. Florida counted everything in 1 day. No excuse for lesser states to take days. I am inclined to agree. Mail-in ballots take longer, get rid of them, vote in person. I agree. I also agree. You're gonna have quite a fight on your hands though when it comes to Democrats, because they like to say that you're restricting voter access when you say stuff like that. They're incorrect, of course, because if people know that there's 1 day to vote and they're fully informed and ready to make it happen, they're going to make it happen. And the people who aren't are not going to. I think that's great. So I actually had this really spicy take on the 19th Amendment, but it's not just about women voting. It's about uninformed people who have no stake in the system voting when they shouldn't be. The left views voting as a 100% a right and something that absolutely everyone should do 100% of the time. I don't think that's the case. I think only people who have a vested interest in the U.S. doing well should be voting in the election. People who are fully informed, people who've been following the news, people who know their opposition, people who know why they support the party that they support. This would make people less tribal. It would make them more willing to engage and work with the other party. As it is, the Democrats want everyone to vote, and I think that this is because they're appealing to low information voters. Unfortunately true, I really think that's what they're doing, and I think that they understand enough about human nature. They know very little about human nature, but what they do know is that they can appeal to human weakness and create this desire to be involved in something that's not necessarily someplace that everyone should be. The problem is evil people will find their way to opportunity. Incompetent people should be roughly evenly distributed. Possibly so. Red deluge. I hope so. Liz, my entire family voted for Republican today. Arizona. Woohoo! I'm happy for you. I agree, Jay. Timcast needs to reevaluate their regulars. I am not sure about that. They can do whatever they like with their guests and their regulars. No one gets in trouble. It's the government. Vote all red in Minnesota. Fair enough. I'm skeptical as well, but there's something to it. So, Lids, how much should I counter fortify? It's that Russian name. I see it. When is the next chaircast? Next time Dip walks over my keyboard. I don't know. Again, I still don't know how he did that. Because you had to hit 2 different buttons to, Linwood, there we go, to stream again, unless I left it streaming and he just clicked the button for YouTube streaming. I don't know. It's good stuff. Linwood and the Kraken woman were nuts. Yeah, they did not present any of the evidence for their statements. At first I was like, it's really interesting. Might be great. No real comment on what's talked about, but your white balance is off. That is correct, and I'm not concerned. It makes it very warm looking in this room, and I actually kind of like it, so we're going to go with it. And as you can see, my hair matches the door and the floor underneath us, so I think it's awesome. Lydia is going to be just as big as Tim Pool UA. I don't think that's true because I tend to focus on what's positive as much as possible, with the exception of today, and that does not get the kind of clicks that being negative gets, so I don't think it's true. When you on with Chen and Southern, I believe we start at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I will put the link in the description. I need to go and grab it. I forgot. Thoughts on states that allow early voting? I think that we should all be like France, 100%. I think there should be a federal rule against absentee voting and against early voting and that kind of thing. I don't like that stuff at all, and I think that's hugely to blame for all of our issues. All right, you guys, I just talked a whole bunch. I'm going to have to talk a lot more tonight from 8 p.m. to 11 or midnight. I'm going to be filling in some of the gaps over on Lauren and Lauren's Odysee stream. So let me go find the link for that. I'll put it in the description below. You guys can check out what's going on over there. I will also tweet that. I'll put that on my Instagram. It's going to be a great time. I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully no drinking games because I need to stay alert and awake for the rest of the night. So wish me luck for sure. I hope it is a red tsunami. I really do. I think that conservative people have finally started paying attention. And I don't know if this is the realignment that we were all hoping for, but I do think that it's kind of woken people up to a lot of these problems that a lot of us have been yelling about for years and years. I will say that it is hard to have been paying attention to all of this stuff for the last 20 years and to be surrounded by people who are just now realizing a lot of the issues that I saw even when I was 11 years old. It is hard, but I am also very glad for all these new people who are just now noticing what's going on. I think it's great. I'm very excited to kind of be a resource for those people, and I hope to do some of that over there on Odysee tonight. Not Rumble, Odyssee's. I'll put the link in there. Thank you guys all for being so supportive. Until 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will see you all then. Bye, guys.